Suez Canal presented a rare opportunity for Germany to harass the British Empire. A crucial British sea lane, vulnerable to attack by land forces. But Germany couldn't spare any men from the Western Front, so Berlin turned to Ottoman Turkey, her ally since November 1914. The Turkish Fourth Army was stationed in Palestine, just 150 miles from the Suez Canal. The Turks agreed to help capture Suez, assigning these 19,000 troops. They saw it as the first stage in their own reconquest of Egypt and Libya.
We marched at night and only by moonlight. My heart was filled with a deep melancholy, mingled with great hope of success. At the sound of the song, "The Red Flag Flies Over Cairo," to the accompaniment of which the advancing battalions forged ahead over the endless waste of desert, feebly illuminated by the pale gleam of the waxing moon.
The Turks had to transport howitzers, floating pontoons, food and water across the Sinai Desert, and didn't lose a single man. In the early hours of the 3rd of February 1915, they reached the Suez Canal. The German colonel who had planned the operation now watched it go horribly wrong.
A sentry noticed our attack and fired. The shots created panic. The English then blasted the banks with machine gun fire.
The Turks found the canal defended by 9 British warships and 30,000 Indian troops dug into defensive positions. The Ottoman troops suffered 1,200 casualties. The survivors retreated across the desert. The attack had failed, but Africa was now a battleground in Germany's global war. She had 3 bases of operations: the Cameroons, Germany East Africa, where Letov was still at large, and German Southwest Africa with its ports and wireless stations. Luckily for Britain, she had a colony right next door. Unluckily, it was the one whose loyalty she could least rely on. The Union of South Africa was racially diverse. Blacks, Boers, and British settlers. Just 15 years before, Britain had fought a long, bloody war against the Boers. Many still had little love for Britain. Their loyalty could not be counted on. As one commander told South Africa's Prime Minister, Louis Botha,
"My men are ready. Whom do we fight? The English or the Germans?"
But South Africa was ideally situated to launch an attack on German Southwest Africa. British Colonial Secretary Louis Harcourt took the gamble.
If your ministers desire and feel themselves able to seize such part of German Southwest Africa as will give them the command of the wireless stations there, we should feel this was a great and urgent imperial service.
South Africa's government readily agreed because it had many imperial ambitions of its own. It wanted to seize German Southwest for itself. On the 14th of September 1914, South African forces crossed the Orange River into German Southwest. But the Germans were one jump ahead, as the South Africans found out when they paused at the watering hole of Sandfontein. The South Africans were beaten, but there was worse to come. Part of South Africa now rose up in armed rebellion. Commanding the forces in the Northern Cape was Manie Maritz. Fearless and uncompromising, Maritz had fought a vicious guerrilla campaign against Britain in the Boer War. His sympathies lay entirely with Germany.
I received a telegram ordering me to take a large commando into German Southwest Africa. I was determined not to fight on behalf of the British Empire, and my officers and troops were in full accord with me.
In October 1914, Manie Maritz crossed the Orange River into German territory at Squeet Drift to enlist German support. Two days later, Maritz addressed his troops under this tree.
Now, men, we don't want to be ruled by the Jews and the financiers of England. General Beyers, General de Wet and myself have decided to form an independent South African Republic and have entered into an agreement with the governor of German Southwest Africa. They will provide us with arms and ammunition, guns. On this step depends the freedom of the masses of the country.
Britain's request for help had brought her dominion to the brink of civil war. In London, the Colonial Secretary Lewis Harcourt feared the breakup of the Union of South Africa. He secretly ordered 30,000 Australian soldiers diverted to the Cape to smother the rebellion.
Safety of the Union is first and paramount consideration. We attach no importance to German Southwest Africa in comparison.
The Australians weren't needed. In the winter of 1914, the loyal South Africans defeated the Boer rebels. This is rare film of 50 of them being led to trial in Cape Town. But they never caught Manie Maritz. By July 1915, South Africa cornered the Germans, forced their surrender, and annexed their colony. And Britain had more work for South Africa, north this time, to deal once and for all with von Lettow. London turned to South Africa's defence minister to lead the campaign, Jannie Smuts. Smuts too had fought in the Boer War, but was now passionately pro-British. More a statesman than a soldier, Smuts made an indifferent general of conventional forces. And he was up against Lettow. British officer Richard Meinertzhagen was now Smuts' intelligence officer.
Smuts is quite determined to avoid a stand-up fight. He told me he could not afford to go back to South Africa with the nickname Butcher Smuts. If von Lettow is clever and Smuts not clever enough, there's going to be trouble.
Lettow was clever. Here, at his headquarters at Moshi railway station, he thought through the idea of depriving Britain of manpower in Europe by opening up the war in Africa.
The question was, could we, with our small forces, prevent considerable numbers of the enemy from intervening in Europe, or inflict substantial damage on their armaments and troops? I strongly believed that we could.
By August 1916, Lettow had become expert at his cat-and-mouse game.
Von Lettow is slippery and is not going to be caught by manoeuvre. He knows the country better than we do. I think we're in for an expensive hide-and-seek, and von Lettow will still be cuckooing somewhere in tropical Africa when the ceasefire goes. Smuts has cost Britain many hundreds of lives and many millions of pounds.
Lettow ran his force of up to 15,000 soldiers, mostly black, on scrounging and improvisation. No supplies from Germany reached him after March 1916, but he made a little go a long way, as Ludwig Deppe, one of his medical officers, noted.
When there was no ammunition, Lettow would try to produce his own cartridges. If the men asked the commander for weapons or clothes, they were told, "Take it from the enemy." Lettow made war at cost price. You'd have been justified in displaying this war at a country fair with a for sale sign. Cheapest war in the world.
Jannie Smuts had 5 times Lettow's force and resources to match. But the further he went into German East Africa, the more stretched his supply lines. And he reckoned without the killer tsetse fly. The life expectancy for his 50,000 horses was just 4 weeks. Torrential rain, mud, dust and boiling heat further slowed his progress. Intelligence was sketchy, maps inadequate. Telephone cable often had to be raised to 8 meters to avoid damage by giraffes.
This is like warfare of bygone days. We come along where no road had ever been, where probably white man had never trod before. The river is in flood and we can't get across. On the other side, the German patrols are watching us, but the crocodile hold the peace between us very successfully.
Lettow played with Smuts, refusing to fight, slipping away, luring him deeper into Africa. As they went, they spread the war's grief and destruction, dragging in more and more of the people of Africa. This war was being carried on the backs of black Africans. For the Lettow campaign alone, the British recruited over 1 million black porters. 1 in 5 died from malnutrition and disease, death rates comparable with those on the Western Front.
They endured their ordeal quietly. They only had duties and hardly any rights. They tumbled into the splashing mud with their heavy loads and were then ruthlessly forced to move on and catch up.
Oh, the Lindy Road was dusty and the Lindy Road was long. But the chap what did the hardest graft, who could not do but ride